So there has been a phenomenon, a social phenomenon, and it's called metoo, or hashtag metoo, right? How to describe it? I mean, it's basically women who are encouraged to use that hashtag metoo and then describe, either they just use the hashtag and don't say anything more, indicating that they have been sexually harassed or worse in their life, or they add some story about in what way they have been harassed or worse. And I guess that it's an interesting campaign on social media. You're putting focus on a problem. There's nothing wrong with that, I think, just to state that in the beginning, so people won't make a straw man of me as easily. It's a good way of focusing on a problem. You can create a social media campaign where people are expressing their, experiences about something. So I don't want to criticize that. But there are stuff that has happened.
Okay, here's the but. Okay.
Everything after a
okay,
but.
It's okay. It wouldn't be interesting if we didn't have a but in this.
Exactly. I like buts, in the grammatic way. Anyway. So there are aspects of this campaign that is worth addressing. And one such aspect is, what is sexual harassment? That is the first question you should ask yourself. To basically be able to define the problem, right? And people don't have the same opinions about what sexual harassment is. But I think you can divide it in, like, 3 parts, perhaps.
Okay.
I mean, I think we should try to define sexual harassment there, and then we can see what happens when you use this Me Too hashtag on the different definitions.
Sounds reasonable. Okay? Let's go.
So one way it has been used. I mean, I'm not talking about how it should be defined now, but rather how it has been defined.
In the scope of this hashtag.
Exactly. And I think that, like, what I'm thinking is the different way it can be understood has different moral problems. Or is the badness of it varies between the definitions. And that's one of the problems. If you have one definition for all of these different ways, say that they're equally bad, then you are sort of making it sound that really bad things aren't that bad, or you're making it sound like things that aren't that bad are really bad, even though they aren't. So you're kind of giving the wrong picture by doing that. And the parts I can identify is sexual begging. And that is when a guy is, or a girl, but in this context, of course, we're talking about guys mostly, when they are begging for sex. So if you are a girl, I say, come on, can't we have sex? And they say no, and I say, but it will just take a very short time. I don't know. I mean, that might not have been the argument in reality.
It seems like you haven't done this a lot in your life. Me neither, I should say.
True. I don't usually beg for sex, but there are guys doing this, seriously. And that is, of course, annoying, I suppose. And then we have what I call sexual clumsiness. When you are hitting on someone in a way that is just bad.
So this is different from the begging part.
Yeah, because if you beg, that's a certain thing you're doing. You could beg for anything. You could beg for money. You could beg for candy, for drugs. For everything, anything you want.
Or sex. Yeah.
So and in all cases, begging is annoying, right?
Oh yeah.
Because the question of begging is a specific question, and I think that it applies to a lot of areas, including sex. So that already we can start to think about how it is equal to harassment. Okay, there are sexual begging, and that is something that's been mentioned in the Me Too campaign. And then there is sexual clumsiness, and that is when you hit on someone in a clumsy way. So sexual clumsiness could be flirting with someone in a way that it offends the person, or in a way that you are sort of coming too close, that you aren't reading the signals correctly.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
So you have all good intentions. You're just gonna flirt.
Oh, okay. You have good intentions.
Exactly.
Okay. So this is. I'll wait with the criticism I might have until you mention all the categories, because you might include that in the last one.
Precisely. So sexual clumsiness is when you flirt in a clumsy way, or you hit on someone in a clumsy way, and you can compare that to being clumsy in other areas. So if I come to your place and you have an expensive television, and I accidentally, perhaps because I'm a large man, turn around and I somehow knock the television over, and it just goes, it just smashes to the ground, and it's rendered non-functional.
Yeah.
Okay, it breaks basically. So I break your television by mistake. Okay, that's bad. But how would you react towards me? Would you say, you fucking asshole? You're gonna, how angry would you be? Obviously, you would be upset, obviously. But you would probably be more upset if I come to your house and I take the television and say, I hate your fucking television, and I threw it to the floor. There is a moral difference here, right? There's a moral difference.
I totally agree.
Exactly. So one reason that we are not as angry when someone is clumsy is because the likelihood of it happening again is less likely.
Exactly. I just want to say, it's interesting because when I think about you and your personality, I know that you would never say, I hate your fucking TV, just throw it to the ground. However, you can be a bit clumsy sometimes.
That is true. That
is something.
I'm the first person to admit that. But I would say I'm not sexually clumsy. Okay, just get that out of it. Sorry. Let's just get that out of the...
Yeah, no, yeah.
So but there is a moral difference. Okay, so, and the reason is that my character isn't necessarily flawed if I accidentally break your television. But my character is flawed if I do it on purpose. So I think the same thing can be said about sexual clumsiness. It's annoying and it's upsetting.
Can you give an example of sexual clumsiness here? What it would be?
That would probably be a good idea. So let's say that I read your signals as if you're interested in me. Okay? And I walk to you and I say, do you want to have sex with me? That's my first question. And as you can imagine, that doesn't end well for me because
no.
I think this is something that is commonly known. And I will come to that point, actually. It's a very interesting point. But yeah, if I say that to a woman, she will be upset. And she might even give me a...
bitch slap
in the face. And, so that is something that... and that's just one example of how it could be. It could be like I can also misinterpret the signals in other ways. Like if we are dancing, I might get the impression that you're really into me. And then I try to kiss you. Because I have... made the mistake of believing you want that, and you don't. So
exactly,
I'm shocked when you push me away.
And you can be clumsy in the way that you don't really understand that the way you come off, even if you don't know whether the person is interested in you or not. You still try to gain their interest, and you might do it in a clumsy way because you really don't understand social codes here or how the person will react.
Exactly. And we can also try, before we continue, we can also discuss the reasons behind why you are clumsy sexually. And one reason could be that you're drunk. Okay, you are intoxicated, so you have lost your inhibitions and you have lost your normal capacity to spot subtle social signals. Or
if that happens too often, you should probably stop drinking, though. But
yeah, of course, of course. I mean, you can narrow it down to some kind of character flaw, perhaps, if it's about being drunk. But then there is also the other reason, which is a lack of experience. Okay, and this is an interesting point because which is necessary to make in the further discussion, because if you're a guy, you are in this culture, and I think it's basically. Why this is the case in our culture is, I think, because of our evolutionary history. But whatever the reason you want to explain it with, it is still true that guys are expected to take the initiative in our culture, right? So at some point in a guy's life, they have to start to try to flirt, okay? They can't just know exactly how to do it. Of course, they have some information about it from school, perhaps, if they have a good educational system.
Or they might have watched... No, sorry, that was a reference to Harrison Ford. It's another episode, sorry.
Yes, but maybe that comes first. Anyway, so they might have had some prior information about how to do it, but they haven't tried it. I mean, you can watch a person ride a bike a million times, but you will never learn to ride a bike from doing it. And I think that's because it's a skill rather than a theoretical knowledge. And I think flirting is a skill in the same way.
Yeah, it's a social skill. Of course, you need to do it for real.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't start to flirt until you are, as a guy, most guys don't start until they are, perhaps a few years after they become, mature enough to have sex. So
Yeah, we're talking about the like majority of guys now.
Yeah, the majority of guys.
There will be outliers.
Yeah, there will be outliers, but the majority of guys will start flirting, predate, and they will not have the chances to do it particularly often, because there is special social situations that justify you in flirting. I mean, it's surprisingly few situations where it feels like it's okay to flirt.
Yeah, just on
and
town
one of the mistakes
it's...
people do is, of course, that they chose the wrong social situations. Like you do it in this board meeting, or you're doing it in class when you're doing a homework together. That's one of the mistakes some people are doing. They're choosing the wrong social situations, and in the right social situations, a lot of mistakes are also made. And that means that it takes time for a guy to gain the experience to do it in the right way, right? So there will naturally be a sexual clumsiness when it comes to young guys. And also, I think, but that's a discussion that comes a little bit later, I think, but also girls. You have to learn to interact socially, and in that process, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Okay, so that's, I think, an important point. When it comes to this discussion about how bad it is, how morally blameworthy are you when you do such a mistake? Okay, and then we have the other side of the sexual harassment.
Okay, so now we're getting
spectrum.
to the third category here.
Exactly, third category in this spectrum of sexual harassment. And that is, what I would call sexual harassment, when you intentionally ignore lack of consent.
Okay,
that is basically how I would define it. The person says no, and you have all the reason in the world to believe her. There's no play going on, no games going on. She's really not into you, but you are horny and you don't care, so you touch her between her legs. And if the person does that, I think it's entitled to be called sexual harassment. And you don't care about consent, and that is the third. And the fourth, I think.
There's a fourth.
Yes,
category.
There's a fourth, which I should have mentioned in the beginning. But okay. And the fourth way is rape. You're not just touching a boob or the vagina, or you're not just forcing your tongue down their throats. You're basically forcing an intercourse on that person, either when they are unconscious to have expressed their opinion about it, or when they explicitly say no. That is rape.
Is that really a fourth category, or isn't that just like more extreme version of the sexual harassment part?
It is, because clearly a person that does the first thing there would also be able to do.
Yeah, and you can have like, it could be a scale, so that you're willing to, like, for example, touch somebody even though they don't consent, but you aren't willing to rape them, for example.
Exactly. And this is, I think, we can say that is 3.5 then. Okay. It's the worst variant. I mean, more people are probably touching pussies than putting dicks in them. But that is perhaps
vulgar, but
but that is perhaps because it's hard to do the other way. I mean, it's difficult and it's complex to rape someone, I assume.
But I
am very fucking. I wouldn't say impressed, because I really despise rapists. I hate them. But I'm still, flabbergasted.
Yeah, that's a better word.
How someone could actually rape someone. Because I have a cat, and it's much weaker than me. I mean, this is a small cat, okay, and it's weaker than me. But when I'm gonna cut its claws, I mean, I cut them a little bit, because otherwise it destroys all my furnitures. It's like trying to control a wild monkey that is 10 times stronger than me, and it's like it's everywhere, and it's clawing me, and it's. I mean, can you imagine trying to do that to a human being?
Exactly, but that's one.
This is, of course, my lack of experience talking. I mean, if you're in such a situation in reality, you probably know intuitively why it's different. But for me, for me, that just sees this,
and the victim might fight back or not. And also, I would also say another part of it. Also, not using the word impressed again, but also flabbergasted, I guess, that somebody would actually be somehow turned on in that situation, where you basically have to fight with this person in order to have sex with her, and you somehow. But that's a totally different motivational structure, of course, than, for example, than you and me have. Yeah, exactly. So, of course, it's hard for us to even imagine why that would be somehow nice or something that you would want to do.
Exactly. So that kind of extreme, obvious rape. There are less obvious rapes. I mean, this sexual harassment.
I was going to add as well that, of course, one more reason that I think that more people are touching pussies instead of putting dicks in pussies, which is a very vulgar expression that you now created that I'm going to use, is because I think that many still might have a moral line somewhere where they draw after touching somebody. So they think it's like somehow okay to do that, but they wouldn't necessarily be willing to rape somebody.
Yeah, so this is, I think, a good distinction, because if someone that knows that there is no consent touch someone between their legs, most likely what they're hoping for is to create consent. And it's like, okay, but if I touch her
that
here,
would be the best scenario, I guess, for most people.
Yeah, exactly. So they probably don't want them to continue to not wanting them to touch them, but they rather think that maybe that will make her horny. And I think the reason...
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that can be the explanation for every person's reasons why. But many people probably do it because they hope to change their mind, in a very primitive way of thinking. What I think they do is that they assume that people work like themselves. And they think, if a girl comes and put their hand on my dick, they're going to turn me on. And so, reasonably then, she should be turned on if I touch her.
So, yeah, exactly. So maybe that would be an extreme case of clumsiness as well, if somebody thinks like that.
Yeah, and the interesting point here is that they are, and we can discuss that either in this episode or sometime else, but women are actually, statistically, they aren't getting turned on like men, and they're turned on by stimuli. Visual stimuli isn't as important to women as it is to men. I don't think that is a controversial claim. Men are more visual in their sexuality than women.
Exactly, I think most would agree. I mean, I definitely agree with you, and I think that most would even agree with you that this is the case, even though they might say that this is because of social structures that have somehow created this. While I guess both you and me would say that this is some way more deeply rooted in human beings. But still, I think most people would still.
Yeah, I mean, just look at
this.
What is the target group for porn, and what is the target group for erotica?
Yeah,
like in literature. Women read erotica, generally speaking, and men watch porn, generally speaking, because they are more visual, etc. So women can actually be turned on, I think, by being touched. But you have to know the subtle signs here. So as you said, that's a form of clumsiness, probably, that you think that this woman will be turned on if I touch her. I don't know how unattractive I am, for example, and therefore I think I have the capability of turning her on by touching her. That's a form of clumsiness. But it is also, I think, the borderline, because you're also ignoring consent. You think it's okay that she doesn't have it right now, and I ignore that to create it.
I mean, if you were some kind of god that always, as soon as you touched a woman, that person became interested in you, then I guess it would be, I don't know if we will say let's say a gray zone, I guess, but still that would be another type of scenario. And here we're talking about somebody who might think that, well, most of the time people should get turned on if I touch them, or the person might think, well, this might happen sometimes, and other times I just don't care if I do it against their consent. And that's more often than the third category that you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So there is this grayscale, I think, from the beginning to the end here. And they have different moral statuses. So let's just conclude that and discuss this campaign, metoo. Okay, so metoo basically fails to make these kind of distinctions. Instead, they put all these experiences under the same category of sexual harassment. And I think the bad thing about that is that you, as I said in the beginning, you make it sound like rape is as bad as sexual begging, and you make it sound that sexual begging is as bad as rape.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't do that, I think many would contest that claim that you just made.
Yeah.
But I think that many would say that they're part of like the same spectrum, and that they affect each other somehow, and that they are like part of the same problem that can be attacked in with the same kind of solutions, maybe, when you don't make that distinction. So even if you don't agree that they are as bad, because I don't think that I don't know, but I think that most people will say that rape is much worse than touching somebody. It would still just be on a spectrum with the same kind of
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I think that is the opinion, but I think there are reasons to doubt that is the case, because as I said, sexual begging, it has reasonably other reasons than rape. I mean, it feels
I think so
too
as well.
different.
Yeah.
There are too many differences, and sexual clumsiness, as I said already, it has a natural explanation. People are inexperienced. And they must be allowed to make mistakes to make sexuality work in the first place.
And I think one of the overarching themes that many think about when they think about the Me Too campaign is probably a sort of disrespect for women.
Yeah.
And that's obviously not the case in all these cases then, because when it comes to true clumsiness and trying to get experience...
and even begging.
And even begging, yeah, exactly. That doesn't necessarily have to be connected to any disrespect of the person you're engaging with.
Exactly. Exactly. Begging is clearly a case where you want consent very badly, but you don't want to do anything against the consent. So, but of course, it is against the consent about not being a victim of someone begging. But it's important to you that she agrees, and you really want to try to make her agree by verbal means.
Yeah, and I guess that's...
Come on, let's. It's annoying, but
I guess
it's
that
not
is a form of clumsiness, because that's...
It's okay. Let's just say
you think that it somehow will work. Or...
yeah, it's stupid.
Yeah,
it's stupid as hell, and since it's stupid, it's clumsy, but it's a different kind of clumsiness, because you're not doing the right thing in the wrong way. You're doing the entire wrong thing, right? So I think you can make a difference there. But as I've always said, we seem to be agreeing on that. There are similarities between these things, but there are too many differences in the ends of the spectrum, right?
And I'm thinking of more ways that you can divide this up, but I don't think we should get caught up in the details. It's enough to show that there are clear differences here.
And another important point is that there are differences in how much is caused by men and not by women, and how much is also caused by women. And in the sort of right end of the spectrum, where we have rape, I think it's quite... it's not controversial to say that there are mostly men, doing that thing. So the more right of the spectrum you get, the more men are doing it in comparison to women. Okay?
Or rather, you're talking about the more in this separate category altogether, where you don't care about consent.
Yeah, you can say that.
Yeah,
and that's probably a bigger male problem than female problem. But if we look at begging and we look at clumsiness, I also think it's a larger male problem, because men are expected to take initiatives, right? So they will be doing it wrong more often.
Yeah, they are the ones who will be exposed to actually being able to do this.
Yeah, exactly. But I think this is an important point, if women would take as much initiatives as men, I mean, I don't think the reason women don't do it as often, I don't think it is because they have better characters. I think it is because they're taking fewer initiatives. And if they would take a similar amount of initiatives as men, we would see an equal amount of mistakes being made. And when they do, I mean, if you somehow control for the different attempts, you would probably see that women are basically equally bad at flirting.
Exactly. However, I think that going back to one of the examples you had before of, I think that more guys would be more
forgiving.
Yeah, you could say forgiving, and actually be positive towards these attempts by women to court them, because it would basically be like, okay, she's interested, great, I'm interested too.
Exactly.
And this is more of an imbalance in how interested men and women are in each other from the get-go. But if you would look at it, take a step back and be like, okay, if I switch roles here, and if you have a woman approaching a man, and you would just switch roles and think about, okay, what if the man said the exact same thing to the woman here? Would it be okay? Then I think that your point is valid.
Yeah, exactly. And that is quite interesting, because women don't usually flirt in that direct way. You know that. But as you say now, when they do, they get away with it more when they do mistakes, because men are it's so rare for men in general to be approached. So they're going to be happy about a very clumsy approach as well. But sometimes women fails to see consent. Okay, they think that a man is interested for some reason, and they start to beg, and they start to persuade the person by touching and by talking. I mean, this has happened to me, and I must say that I'm an introvert, basically, so I don't have super much experience with the opposite gender, and I don't think it has to do with attractiveness, actually, but it has to do with the fact that I don't usually put myself in a situation where there are stuff like this happen. And still, even though my experience probably is limited compared to a very extroverted guy, and most people are extroverted, so I think I have lesser experience in general, I still have a lot of experience about women doing what I would call clumsy things and begging. I mean, I have rejected women who has been mad at me because of it, and they've called me gay, and once I had, I couldn't get it up, okay, to be honest, at this situation, because it was a weird situation for me. I didn't consent, I didn't want to do it, and that made her call me a dead fish, and she was really upset. These are different persons doing this, and I have had girlfriends who has tried to touch me, not girlfriends maybe, but dates, who has tried to touch me between my legs just to see if I'm turned on by them. Like, is he hard now? They want confirmation that they are hot, right? Or that I am attracted to them. So they just spontaneously touch me between my legs. And that is annoying to me, as I guess it is annoying to a woman. But all these things have happened to me quite a lot, to be honest, and I don't have that much experience. So I assume it happens a lot more to other guys. But they don't complain. You will not hear a guy say, "Oh, it was so annoying. This girl always tried to touch my dick." I mean, no guy's going to do that. So
that's a few cases.
There's a hidden number of males being subjected to this behavior.
And it might also be two different subsets here, because a large part of population would probably be like, see that as some kind of confirmation of their sexuality and be quite honestly happy about it. And another part will not be that happy about it, but won't complain because of like, that's not what you do.
And it was interesting because they reported about this in the Scientific America about victimization, and it seems that there's a large, is much more often than we normally think, men are subjected to victimization. They are being sexually harassed, and in lesbian relationships, there's a lot of that going on as well. I mean, women who are being subjected to harassment by other women. And rape in prison, according to this article, or this study that the article was about, rape in prison is more common in women prisons than in male prisons. And when you think about it, that is quite reasonable, because I know it's not reasonable as it is good, but it is understandable. Okay? And I think that homosexuality is extremely stigmatized when it comes to males, right? So you don't want to be considered homosexual,
if you're not,
generally speaking. If you're not, I mean, people, even the most homosexually friendly person would probably feel like his manliness or masculinity is somewhat put in question if he's considered gay, right? So it's something men don't usually want to be considered, and then it's less likely that men will rape other men, because that would make them look totally gay, right? So in a prison where men really, really want to look like strong men, they don't want to be considered gay. So I think it's understandable that the rape is actually going to be quite low in prisons, where no one is going to want to be considered gay. While women, they don't have that social inhibition towards homosexuality. So maybe that's why it's more frequent in women prisons, because then it's, it's like normal sex. It's like, that is not as stigmatized, so people is more likely to try to do it. Perhaps it's just my amateurish explanation of this data. The data is there. It's more common in women prisons. Well, so what I want to say about that is just that at the other end of the spectrum, or at the first part of the definition of harassment, I think it's basically going to be close to 50-50. In who is the victim and who is the the one. But of course, there are going to be more guys doing it because they are trying it. They're going to put themselves in a situation where it's more likely that they make the mistake.
Yeah. So shouldn't there be more guys doing it?
Exactly. So what I want to say is just that girls are just as clumsy. It's that they are much less often doing the thing that would make them make a mistake.
Yeah, and it's not because they know that they are clumsy that they aren't taking initiatives. It's because they don't have to, or because they don't feel like they are supposed to. So it's really not because they themselves have made the decision that I'm probably not good at this, so I shouldn't do it, which...
Yeah, exactly. So it's not that... Because to make the case that women are somehow victims only, you have to make the case that they somehow know better. Like, that they can prevent themselves from committing these mistakes, sexual mistakes. And clearly, I don't think that is the case. And also...
but you're talking about some kind of potentiality then.
No, but if you and me, if I play a video game, say for the first time, I'm gonna make a lot of mistakes in that video game, and then you can say to me, "You are so fucking bad. You are a bad person." But the reason you don't make the same mistakes is you don't play that video game.
Oh yeah.
You know, I don't think you're justified in to call me an idiot because you imply that you are better than me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So that is the way. I don't think if you criticize men like, it's just not right to criticize them in that way. Right? So. That if you just don't count all that clumsiness, you have these really important Facebook statuses left. They're going to be a lot fewer of them, but they're going to be about rape and about actual
exactly.
harassment.
And the signal to noise ratio will be so much higher of the actual relevant things that we really should.
Yeah, exactly. And it all began with those kind of things. I think this Weinstein guy, or whoever you pronounce his name, he did something like those things, those important things, those things that really are bad. And then everyone wanted to join in, and they was like, well, I've never been raped, but there was some catcalling going on. I mean, it totally blends the important things out with the unimportant things, And in Sweden, the Me Too campaign has been exploding like a cancer, okay? It has been in the media since it began, every day, basically. And there are actually statistics about this that clearly shows that Sweden is where the hashtag has been used the most. And that says something, I think, about the nature of Sweden's intellectual climate. It is infested with radical feminism. Because, of course, it is the radical feminism that want to compare sexual clumsiness of the mildest kind with rape. That is radical feminism. But in Sweden, it's not a fringe moment. And that is important to note. And I think I want that to be clear for everyone in the entire world, that in Sweden, feminism is radical. Because you often hear in feminist circles or discussions, in international discussions, that, well, the men-hating feminists are like a fringe group. That's a small group in comparison to the more enlightened feminist or something who doesn't hate men or have some kind of more modest view. But in Sweden, the common view is the radical view. Okay. And these statistics is a very good indication of that. And the nature of what is inside this, what is being posted along with the hashtag, well, it clearly indicates how crazy this situation has become.
And I would add that, but even if it may not, I don't know if we would say that it's the majority view of everybody who are like feminist in the classical sense, it's still the view that is absolutely heard the most and gets the most attention and is what people will, when they turn on the TV or read a newspaper, see as the established view.
Yeah.
It's hard to say whether this is something that everybody agrees with. I think that might be a more gray area there.
Yes, so I'm not trying to make the point that every woman, for example, is radical feminist. I'm just saying that those who call themselves feminists are going to be prone to radical opinion. That's something I actually believe. I believe that if you hear a woman say she's a feminist...
Or a man,
and that's important too, because they are maybe the most interesting kind of feminist, which is another discussion. But anyway, so I think that feminists in Sweden, when a completely normal person say they are feminists and you ask them about certain things, they're going to come off as really radical. I mean, there was a famous person in Sweden. She's quite famous internationally. She's called Sara Larsson. Pop artist. And she wrote a Twitter entry.
A tweet.
That said, I hate men. Okay.
Yeah, and she continued, I think, I hate men.
Yeah, so she didn't just hate men, she hated men. And okay, and she's young. She was young then, at least. She was like 18 years old or something. So we can, I wouldn't judge her. She's a teenager, and I think if I had Twitter when I was a teenager, well, let's just say that I would have been very embarrassed. But luckily, Twitter didn't exist in the 90s. Still, I wouldn't judge her so much for being an immature teenager. But and this is just proving the point I'm trying to make. She won the prize by one of the biggest newspaper in Sweden.
Which one?
Expressen, I think.
Okay.
And she got the title Woman of the Year. Okay, not for her music, but for that specific tweet and the following discussion.
Yeah,
of course.
Okay. Right.
So I mean, if it wouldn't have been a discussion afterwards, it would have been forgotten. But it started to be discussed. Everyone was, one side was very angry, and then there was the defense from the feminist community. So I'm not trying to say anything about her, because really, she was just an immature teenager.
Yeah, I agree.
The problem was how society reacted.
Exactly, and adult people who actually
adult people who was
raising her up.
Yeah, they was just blowing up her ego like to the size of Jupiter. Okay. And saying that she was some kind of role model, and one of the ministers in the government said that she would have loved to see her as the prime minister in the future. I mean, she literally said that she would have been a good candidate for prime minister. This teenage girl who said she hates men.
She might be in 10 years if she have other opinions, but as of now, no.
No, exactly. It's an absurd thing to say. It's so absurd. And of course, so it's a Woman of the Year, and she's being praised by each and everyone, and everyone is this hashtag. They had a hashtag that said support. It was something like support Sarah or something.
Backa Sarah.
Just a Backa Sarah, back Sarah, basically. They had a hashtag, back Sarah.
Back her up.
Back her up, exactly. So I mean, you can imagine the dire situation that is the case right now. When someone who says that, I mean, you can't say that it's just a small group of extremists who say they hate men, but well, not in Sweden. In Sweden, they get called the Woman of the Year. So, yeah. That's it. I think I don't need to say anything more. I mean, says everything by itself.
I think so as well. That's a good ending point.
Yeah. Oh my God.